Welcome back to Block TV. It is time for Cryptonomics and that ever-elusive crypto ETF. VanEck Securities Corporation and Solidex Management, a duo that have unsuccessfully petitioned the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission for over a year to approve an exchange-traded fund that invests in Bitcoin, have found a workaround for some large investors. The companies actually said in a statement on Tuesday that by using a different rule of the Securities Act of 1993, they're going to reissue it. But in order to make sense of that, obviously, I need to be joined in studio by Usher Westorp-Evans, Block TV's senior correspondent. Usher, this sounds like the same lady with a different gown.
Yes, it certainly is. And they're not pretending, VanEck is not pretending that this is not that. They are using this as a workaround, as a temporary sort of staying point in order to get them to access it. So that rule you were talking about, that's the Rule 144A, which says it'll allow privately placed securities to be traded among qualified institutional buyers with shorter holding periods and without the requirement to register with the SEC. So that's an important workaround. It just means for those select clients, which may be arguably the most important clients in this ETF market in the modern times, sort of to be the focal point of this ETF, although whether it's truly an ETF or not is another factor.
We're going to touch on that in a second.
Yes, but that will allow them that on-roading access point, and it gets it past those SEC issues, just allow it to happen now while they still wait to see if this ruling will finally happen, scheduled for October after the last delay mid-August. So onto that point I was raising just there, whether it's truly an ETF, analysts have come out and saying, no, this isn't actually a true ETF because it's done directly through a broker, through over-the-counter trade. So they're calling it sort of, maybe in a joking way or in a new sense, a BTF, that's a broker-traded fund, rather than exchange-traded fund, because obviously it's done directly through brokers. But again, aimed at those institutional investors, not for the retail market, and might be that onboarding potential that so many, say, institutions still really are in dire need of, particularly in the US, for getting into the crypto sphere.
Now let's start first with, because the first thing that goes through everybody's head is, okay, what is the SEC saying about this?
Well, so I mean, so far it seems that this doesn't impact the SEC's decisions. This is going around in a very different way. So it's sort of a different access point.
And you think that's going to fly for them? That's what I'm wondering. Because I mean, they issued a statement. Did anybody react to it from authorities, regulators, whatnot?
No, it doesn't seem so yet. And this Rule 144A is a legitimate rule to let them get around this. So it's not that they're being sneaky or duplicitous, or so it seems, as they're legitimately using a different market approach. They're saying, look, we understand that the SEC is not willing to make this firm final ruling yet on a formal ETF that could be publicly traded. So let's take a different approach. Let's directly market to the qualified investors, which is, let's just say, for better or worse, a less sensitive space when it comes to the SEC, because they give more accountability to these qualified investors. Whether or not this is a legitimate free market tactic or not, that's a whole nother matter that I have personal opinions on, Yael. But
I'm going to actually, and I actually want to hear those personal opinions. Let's remind people, though, that the VanEck ETF, when the Sphere, or should we say it, when Block TV even launched, we were already discussing the VanEck ETF. There was a date that was supposed to be approved, and then was postponed. Tell us a bit about that background.
Okay, so they've been ongoing. The approval process takes time, and the SEC has the right to delay approvals repeatedly on these ETFs. So we've got also not only the VanEck ETF, we've also got Bitwise as well as Wilshire Phoenix, which are all attempting to launch ETFs at the moment, or waiting for that approval. They all have been pushed back mid-August. They were pushed back to the final deadline that the SEC is allowed to push them back to, which would be late September, mid-October, between the three different ETF proposals. But many are speculating that they'll just still not go ahead with the approvals, and some would even say that these three companies would pull their ETF proposals before that date as a bit of a saving face, so as not to set a precedent of not being approved. It's sort of seen as a tactically, strategically smart move. Whether that does happen or not, we'll have to wait till later this month and early October to see that, but that's where we stand. And
very good that you mentioned it, because they've done it before. They pulled ETFs before just to save face. Okay, the reaction of the market to this, did it put a dent?
Look, the markets are up. That's the fact of the matter is, the last couple of days, since in correlation to this announcement, the markets are up. Whether that's because this event, whether that's because of issues in Argentina at the moment, whether that's because of ongoing Brexit trauma at the moment, whether it's because of the US trying to trade war at the moment, who can really tell?
Who can really tell? But it's, as you're mentioning, these surrounding global events and attempts of regulating the cryptosphere have seen their share of failure. But there are those in the sphere that will claim that the current state of global monetary affairs is just the aha moment the cryptosphere has been waiting for the greater public to realize that the system is broken and all of us turn to crypto. But is it? Several flashpoints of financial turmoil are currently brewing around the world. Take Britain, for example. Just yesterday, Boris Johnson took on his own parliament and lost, trying to force a hard exit from the EU with far-reaching implications. Let's have a listen.
Point of order, the Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think that, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let there be no doubt, Mr. Speaker, about the consequences of this vote tonight. It means that Parliament is on the brink of wrecking any deal that we might be able to strike in Brussels, because tomorrow's bill would hand control of the negotiations to the EU, and that would mean more dither, more delay, and more confusion.
Confusion, to say the least. Let's talk about, look, Brexit, a long time coming. Needless to say, whatever happens with it will have far-reaching financial implications for not just Britain, the continent and the world. The pound
took a huge hit in the wake of this decision last night. As we saw, it went below $1.20 against the US dollar, a very significant psychological barrier, but it's been a volatile time to say the least. It's already back up now above $1.22, so that's good in the sense if you want the pound to rise in the short term, but the volatility is definitely spooking foreign exchange markets and getting people concerned. In the latest news, which has perhaps caused the rise back up to $1.22, but still continues that volatile trend. We've just seen that the Labour Party have confirmed they're not willing to go back to general elections. So that coming out of the UK at the moment would add further confusion to markets and mean that the whole situation just runs further risk of the UK tumbling out without a formal plan involved. And that's where investors and foreign exchange traders would be really spooked.
Would be really spooked, and I'm asking you because, you know, when Brexit began, and you know, let's hash this out for a second, apropos that aha moment, the CEO of eToro actually said that all of us in the sphere, and I tend to agree, keep waiting for the financial markets to have a complete dive, to die, and that's where crypto will rise, and we should stop doing that. Yes. Are people turning to crypto when all of this is happening?
Globally, who's to say? I mean, look, and when we talk about, you know, we opened with the ETF decisions, that's an important place to look at, you know, the institutions now, with this VanEck move to create the ETF, the BTF, whatever you want to call it, they have created an institutional on-ramp, which might entice some of the bigger players to go out and say, you know what, why not hedge 1%, 0.5%, whatever it might be, of my portfolio into cryptos, whether you consider them a safe haven asset or whether you just consider them an uncorrelated asset.
That's the big players.
That is the big players. Exactly.
Yeah.
If you can get that money into the crypto sphere, you could boost it significantly. Whether or not they're buying into that narrative and whether or not they are willing to do that, or they're just still sticking by the guns that they have for the last 10 years, many of these big institutional players, and going, you know what? This all seems too shifty. I'm not willing to put anything in this. I don't know what's happening. It's interesting to see. No doubt the crisis sees institutions, individuals, retail players look for safe haven assets, look for places to diversify outside the traditional equity markets. And that could be what we're seeing around the world. Again, you know, we're talking the UK, we're talking Argentina, we're talking trade war, of course, and the widespread implications that might have on markets everywhere. And so it is a time when you're going to see investors go, hold on, how can I diversify my assets? How can I hedge against concerns? And whether it's a safe haven or just an uncorrelated asset, cryptos could be a place that starts to see a bigger influx of that larger scale money come in. Remember, you need many fewer players with the larger amounts of money to come in to make a significant
mix. To reach the mass, a greater mass of the public in that respect. But you know, irrespective, clearly these are shifting times in regular markets that we're going to follow closely. It will have effect on the cryptocurrency market. This was Cryptonomics on BLOCKTV. We'll be right back.
For more news and updates, follow us on Twitter.